Let me go ahead and move on with my Devar Torah. So first of all, as you know, I'm composing a so-called midrash on Rebekah. I've been mulling this, I think, since the late '90s, and it starts to take shape. I go to other things, and for some reason this year it all just began to write itself inside of me. I sometimes say my muse is at work while I do other things, and suddenly she says, "I have something for you," and so here we are. So first of all, the term midrash, for those who aren't so clear about it, the word midrash is from the word darash, which means to seek. We see in the story of Rebekah, when she has this terrible, painful pregnancy, she goes to lidrosh et Adonai, to seek of God. We see in the story of Moses, when in chapter 18, the people are disputing each other now that they're out of Egypt, and he's judging each case one by one. And his father-in-law Yitro comes and says, "You're wearing yourself. You're wearing the people out. What are you doing?" And he says, "They come to me lidrosh et Adonai." So Rivka, you see, goes to help. She wants to understand what's happening inside of her. She goes to seek of the divine. In the case of Moses, people are seeking justice. He goes lidrosh et Adonai. So this idea that when there's something happening to you, you're trying to find justice. People would say, "I'm going to seek of God." Now we might say they're going to seek in their deepest selves. That somehow the answers to moral dilemmas are found deep within the realm of the soul. I think it's in the realm of the soul that we have our instincts for love, justice, truth, and beauty, where our values are. So this idea that there's a soul operating quietly within us, and our deepest experiences in life, as James Hillman says, where events become experiences, we go down there, and sometimes we can actually find ourselves in touch with primary drives of love, justice, truth, beauty, and so forth. So this idea lidrosh is to seek meaning in my life, understand what's happening to myself, to seeking justice. And after some time, the word lidrosh was transferred from directly going to an oracle to seek meaning, as in the story of Rivka. They say that she went to the Beit Midrash, the house of Midrash, the house of seeking of Shem and Ever. You remember from other times that she went to study there. As soon as she got to Canaan, she says, "Wow, this tribe is a mess, and my husband is really suffering. I better go take classes at the Beit Midrash of Shem Va'ever." In my imagination, she took classes in archetypal psychology and counseling, spiritual leadership, all kinds of things, because she knew that she would end up running this tribe, healing her husband, and working with these children as a way birthed into a tragedy. So I love the idea that but it's a rabbinic idea, a rabbinic tale, as it were, to explain absences, gaps in the lives of some of the patriarchs. Where did Jacob go during all this time? When it says that Jacob studied in tents, well, where were those tents? And the rabbis created, out of whole cloth in a way, this idea that there's a Beit Midrash of Shem Va'ever. So we say Beit Midrash, study hall. But you could call it the house of seeking God. So then the term Midrash was turned to the Torah itself. Instead of the direct experience of the divine, for example, Moses asking the divine answers to justice questions, getting the advice from his father-in-law to create a judiciary, he says, "But the hardest cases come to me, and I go lidrosh et Adonai." So when the Torah became canon, when there was actually a fixed text, the idea was the Torah, we'll call it now the 5 books of Moses, because the word Torah just means the teaching. So in the Bible, you find the word the teaching many times. And there is a decision to call the 5 books of Moses the Torah, the teaching. But to extract the teaching from the text, you had to have interpretive skills. Uh, Back when I was in graduate school, we called this hermeneutics. It's a word I used to use all the time until I talked myself out of it and just say theory of interpretation. But I like the word. First of all, it was used in the early years of biblical criticism to specifically describe taking meaning from a holy text. Why? Hermes, you might remember, is the messenger of the gods in Greek mythology. So who delivered the meaning of a holy text to people? Hermes. So hermeneutics was a way to, as it were, experience the message from Hermes. Now, hermeneutics then came to be used to study law. Legal hermeneutics means how do you understand what a law says? The statute is there, written on the book, but what does it mean? So when I was in graduate school, hermeneutics, as it were, somewhat of a sexist term, was the queen of all the sciences, meaning each science had a king. Literature, religion, law, social sciences, but every discipline had the queen, hermeneutics. Because when you think about it, you can't study anything if you don't have a formal or informal theory of interpretation, something that people just took for granted. I read, I understand. So in my day, this idea of theory of meaning, how language creates meaning, how poetry creates meaning, looking at a dream as a text, and we have to have a hermeneutic for understanding the dream text that come within us. Those of us who write, one of my, Leonard Cohen, I remember he and I shared this idea of the muse, and people would say to Leonard, "What did you mean by this poem?" And Leonard would say, "I didn't write it. I'll have to ask my muse." I don't think he would go that far, but he shared with me that he said, "I just get out of the way of the muse. The muse writes the poem." So I might sharpen it up a bit, but it doesn't come from me. And when you look at the Hasidic text, the Hasidic teachings and so forth, there's a special hermeneutic for understanding Hasidic literature, and they use a particular hermeneutic or style, theory, mode of interpretation with the text, as is the Kabbalah. The center of the Kabbalah is the Zohar. The Zohar presents itself as an extended midrash on the Torah and other biblical texts. There's about 20 or more different voices in the Zohar, and each one has its own somewhat different hermeneutical style, interpretive style, as they look at the text. Now, of course, what the Kabbalists see in the text is part of the world that they bring to the text. So I'll share with you another couple words from graduate school. Exegesis is drawing out meaning from the text. Maybe some of you remember the days when we had a little bumper sticker at Orator called Jews for Exegesis, and we might revive that. What does Jews for Exegesis means? Jews who like to study the text. Jews for Exegesis. So you can use that. And then, so when I was in graduate school, we say there's exegesis, drawing the meaning out, and then eisegesis is seeing yourself in the text. How do we know the difference between exegesis and eisegesis? Drawing meaning from the text and putting yourself inside the text. And the answer is, we can never know. Because all hermeneutics, we bring ourselves into the text. We bring our concerns into the text. There is no, as it were, pure question that we ask. Early scholarship was saying, we're not bringing a hermeneutic, we're just reading the text as it is. The question is, well, why are you reading the text? What brought you to the text? Something brings you to study this text and not another text. And even the idea that people will study it a certain way. If you study a certain way, for example, source criticism, dividing the Torah into its various sources, you're answering your question. Other people are looking for sitz and leben, the cultural background of the text. So the idea was nobody arrives at a text with a clean slate, just as the human mind is never a clean slate. This is the work of Steven Pinker, whom I recommend to everybody, that we bring a world of interpretation into the world. And one thing I want to add here is the interpretive lens by which we see the world is not fixed. As we go through life, we can actually examine our interpretive lens. And this is a fascinating question for me. We can examine our interpretive lens and ask ourselves, does my interpretive lens lead to depth, to well-being. For example, when people would say, I think of Sam Harris here, like he really hates religion, and whenever I hear him talk about religion, he's one of the most flat-footed, superficial. Other things people say he's a really smart guy, and I'm sure he is. His discussion of religion is in a way crippled by his hatred of religion, and here he has a lens. I'm not sure. I read a book or two of his. I don't listen to his podcast or anything. What would happen if he and other people could see, forget about religion, just look at the beauty and the depth of the Bible and other texts. So sometimes we have a lens that keeps us from experiencing a world of beauty because we come at some things with hostility. I know poetry. I know people say, well, I can't read poetry. I don't understand it. I said, that's actually one thing that makes it poetry. It's not prose. You got to work a little bit. I had people with the prayer book. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. And so they're hostile. I don't like to be scripted. Shouldn't prayer be authentic and spontaneous? And I say, well, let me help you with a new lens. So their lens is, their hermeneutic is, I don't like it. It's not mine. It's scripted. I don't understand it. That's a lens. And they bring that lens every time they come to a religious text. I've met many, many people like that. They come to me and say, either how do I do it? I see everybody else doing it. I would say everybody else has struggled with the same question and somehow gone past it or gotten through it. And sometimes there are people that I remember I think I told you I was at an awards ceremony. There's a lot of Hollywood people there, and Carl Reiner came up to me. This is many, many years ago, and said, I gave the invocation or something. He says, you seem to me like a pretty smart guy. I said, thank you, but I knew what was coming. He said, how could a smart guy like you believe in the Bible? So I said, what do you mean by believe? And he right away saw this was not going to go in his direction. He says, well, he walked away. I thought to myself, it's a guy who's a super funny guy, but inborn is skepticism, and smart people can't love religion. That was his premise. So he came not to ask. That was a complaint, not a question, meaning smart people ought not like religion. And he used the word believe in the Bible. I said, what do you mean by believe? I think he walked away because he suddenly heard to himself, I have no idea what I mean. And then he realized he was, if I might, he was dealing with a really smart guy, not just your average smart guy who doesn't know that the Bible is filled with superstition, but a guy who's actually studied words like belief. And then there was a reason why the honoree had chosen me as his rabbi. So in any case, a belief system both helps you see the world in a certain way, but certain belief systems prevent you from seeing the world in a certain way. So there's so many ways we can use this idea of hermeneutics, the work of Hermes the god to bring meaning into our lives, which became theory of meaning in any discipline, is basically theory of interpretation, theory of how meaning is created, how meaning is communicated, our inner lens or particular theory of interpretation, which is always operating. You might not know you have a theory of interpretation. It's there. It's embedded. Okay, so this big wind-up, because I want to slow down now on what I mean by a midrash on Rebekah. Here's my hermeneutic or interpretation theory when I'm coming to the Bible, especially now, and that is that the midrash, the classical midrash, which means the rabbi studying the Bible, looking for meanings not apparent, looking for meanings that they themselves create, meaning they give meanings that are clearly not in the biblical text. They're not interpreting. They're using the text as an opportunity to bring in their own concerns. This went on for centuries until it was decided to take some of these best interpretations and compose books. We have Midrash Rabbah on Genesis, the great Midrash on Genesis, Exodus, all of them, and many, many more books of Midrash. It's canonized, it's fixed. I mean, you can buy these texts in the store. And part of what we do is we study Midrash. So we're bringing actually our Midrash on to Midrash, trying to understand Midrash. Now, anytime a person gives a Devar Torah, a drash, as it were, they're adding to this thing called midrash. And what do teachers eventually do? Oftentimes, is collect their interpretations into their own comments on the Torah portion. As you know, I sometimes comment on the Torah portion, but more than anything, sometimes I'm doing midrash, which meaning I use the text as an opportunity to bring in my spiritual and moral concerns, which is just like the tradition. So what midrash claims to be doing is seeing the unconscious of the text, that there's an unknown. And if you look at the volumes of midrash, if we can call the midrash the unconscious of the text, the midrash, as it's canonized, far exceeds the length of the Bible, especially the Torah. The midrash on Torah far exceeds the size of the Torah. So the unconscious of the Torah, as it were, is far greater than we might call the conscious Torah. But this idea that the Torah has an unconscious that we have to recover. Susan Handelman has a great book called The Slayers of Moses, and many years ago I met her. She's a real deal, very deep spiritual person, and she said, I think she originated this: we are the psychologists, the psychoanalysts of the Torah. See, the Torah speaks, and we say, let me take you to your unconscious. So whenever we do midrash, we are doing psychoanalysis on the Torah to bring out the unconscious of the Torah. Now, it's a nice literary idea, and there's something to it. So as I began my midrash on Rebekah, I wasn't so much looking for what the text says, but my imagination what the text is not saying. Okay, it's very important to remember, because as I posted some of my Shabbat thoughts on Facebook, some people write, where'd you get that from the Torah? And I say, that's what midrash precisely is, what's not in the Torah. Well, how do you come up with it? The same way that all rabbis came up with midrash, my imagination. It's my soul connecting with the soul of the text and writing what I experience. I'm not making any claim to what I say is true, factual, clearly embedded in the text. In fact, what I'm saying is a product of my literary imagination, roughly connected to the text, because what I'm sharing is how I experience the text. Sometimes I explicate the text, here's what the text means, and sometimes I say, here's our meanings that arise because I've studied the text. So my midrash on Rebekah is my using the text to bring in some of my deepest concerns, partly because I've always loved the literary image called Rebekah. I've spoken about her many times in different places. When people say, can you come and give a talk on the Bible? I say, let's take Rivka. So I love the character, especially the role of Rivka with Esav and Yaakov. All right, so now, so far, I've given the image of Rivka as coming down to Canaan. Lately, I said that this angel who keeps, accompanying, like, for example, when Abraham sent Eliezer to get a wife for Isaac, Abraham sent an angel on the way to make sure things got done. Of course, it was an angel who interceded with Hagar twice and showed her where the water was. There's an angel in Genesis 22 that stopped Abraham from actually killing his son. Now, God appears right after the angel stops him, but sometimes I've talked about it with people. They said, yes, Abraham commanded the sacrifice of Isaac, but I'm sorry, God commanded the sacrifice of Isaac, but God stopped it and said, now that I know you're not, withholding your son from me, I say, God didn't stop it. An angel stopped it. And they look and they say, why an angel? I say, great question. So, one of my hermeneutics that I bring to the text, which I got from a wonderful, wonderful graphic graphic midrash, and as soon as we unpack our containers, I'll actually show it to you. It's called Lichiyot im HaTanach. Not to live with, that would be Lichiyot. Lichiyot means something like live intensely. Lichiyot is to not just be, but engage in life intentionally. And the book shows um, when you see the images. Uh, God has a mafia suit, a fedora, and glasses, and behind that it's there's nothing there because God's invisible, but God does wear heavy sunglasses, a fedora, and a New York mafia suit, as do all of his counselors, and they talk about stuff. And one theme of the book is um, this God is angry a lot and kills people a lot. And there's a couple that says, look, not every solution requires that you kill somebody. So you got to slow this down. And then sometimes when God really does something that almost indefensible, like the killing of Nadav and Avihu, when they offered the Eish Zarah, the strange fire in the book of Numbers, um, they say, you went too far. Like, those are Aaron's sons. He goes, yeah, I don't know. What do I do? You guys got to fix this for me. They said, okay, here's what we're going to do. So right after the death of Nadav and Avihu, Leviticus, Leviticus 10 and 11, okay, right after the story, we're going to put on the commandment not to drink any alcohol before you go into the uh, uh, into the tent of meeting for the sacrifice. People will infer that maybe they were drunk. He said, but we can't keep whitewashing your actions by throwing in another text. You've got to take control of yourself. So that's only one of the many themes of this book, Lichiyot im Tanakh, and I read it, thank God, in the 90s. And wow, I laughed myself through the entire book. What a great midrash, that God has a council, and part of what the angels do is advise God, whitewash when provide a cover up when God does something that they say, it's not right, it's not what you should be doing, and all kinds of other things. So when I get the book out of the container, maybe I'll make sure on each parsha to read a little bit from Lichiyot im Tanakh. All right, so I see the angel, of course, as from this book. I mean, the original idea of an angel functioning as a foil to God. God says, kill your son. The angel says, oh, we're at it again now? All this killing? So he runs down there and he says, I have the image. God says, Abraham, kill your son. And the angel's doing some other angelic thing. He comes back and he says, what are you doing? I told Abraham to kill his son. Oh, not again. And the angel rushes down, stops his hand, and looks at God and says, really? God says, yeah, okay, yeah, thank you for, really, you're really right this time. Thank you for that. Then comes in and says, oh, Abraham, now that I know you haven't held your child from me. So there's so many points in the Bible where we say, why an angel? And so one interpretation is the angel intercedes when God has overdone it. What a wonderful hermeneutic. Okay, so I have the idea that this angel visited Rebekah in dreams to tell her what's going on in Canaan. Remember, an angel accompanies Eliezer to make sure everything goes okay. They're going back down to Canaan, so it's Rebekah and Eliezer and an angel hovering about, doing other angelic things, but always sweeping back in just to make sure everything's okay. And she does what she can. One of my favorite things that I've decided is that as she starts to talk with her husband Isaac, she discovers, and this was a really big moment for me when I just sat with my muse and asked myself, Davar Acher, another interpretation of the trauma of Isaac, because everybody says the trauma was that he was about to be sacrificed. And I thought to myself, not every terrifying incident produces trauma, meaning a lifelong soul disfigurement that you've got to work through very intensely. I mean, I look back at my life. There are times when I've been terrified. There's times when I've been the subject of violence. I wasn't traumatized. It was unpleasant, but it hasn't shaped the rest of my life. And other things, much smaller things, almost things that another person would say, oh my God, you couldn't get over that. It traumatized me. It upset the way I experienced the world, and put a lens that I didn't want, that I didn't like it, that this tiny small thing had happened, and I could feel, God, I was traumatized by that tiny small thing. Big things didn't traumatize me, meaning they were unpleasant. I was terrified, I was hurt, but I didn't have trauma. and little things. So I said to myself, what if, in my midrash, Rebekah, coming to heal Isaac, discovers his trauma is not the Akedah. Now, why did I think this? Because everybody else thinks it, so I want to think something different. And then I thought, from the internal evidence, perhaps Isaac loved his older half-brother, Ishmael, who got kicked out. That Isaac truly loved his father's concubine Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, truly loved her. She was the real mother in the house, his mother, Sarah, being somewhat unavailable. So he went to another figure, Hagar, a particularly loving and understanding woman. And when they are cast out of the house, out of his life forever, he had no say. Nobody asked for his opinion. He had no vote in the matter. Suddenly, two people whom he loved were taken away from him, seemingly by the arbitrary decision of his mother, Sarah, and the acquiescence of Abraham and God. So as I thought about it, I thought, how traumatizing is that? You really love somebody, and they love you, and you've seen them as permanent features of your life, because you know you will never go through life alone, because you have this person, this big brother that says, I'm going to protect your whole life. I don't want to be head of this tribe, but I want to be your bodyguard. And Hagar, who understands Isaac, and suddenly one day he says, where'd they go? Well, they were expelled. Where? Into the desert. He says, that desert? People die there. Yeah, that's what happened. And I just imagine Isaac's world collapsing. This world is arbitrary, it's cruel, it's capricious. The things you love the most are taken from you in an instant. And I imagine Isaac going through a kind of a soul collapse. And therefore, when it came time for, God says, now go sacrifice your son Isaac, Isaac says, fine, I want out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. If this is what the world is, everything you love just gets capriciously just taken from you, and you don't have any agency in the matter. What is a life without agency? What is a life that you don't have? It says that you can decide anything, because people decide for you. And one thing they decide to do is rob your life of the deepest, most intense loves that you have. So I imagine Isaac, like some people have said to me, Rabbi, I feel suicidal. And I say, why? And they describe, an intense period where they lost love. And without the bonds of love, people said to me, I feel stranded. I don't have purpose or meaning in life. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I used to be a loved person, and now I'm not a loved person. And the idea of suicide doesn't mean they're actually going to go get a gun, but rather, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what my purpose is. I feel bereft. I feel empty. And part of my job is, like the poem tonight, well, there's someone whom you haven't lost. There's someone whom you haven't lost. And they say, who's that? And I need to introduce them to their constant companion. The soul who's been walking through them through life, who's experienced this grief. I said, be in conversation with your soul. Because no matter how much you're hurting, your soul is hurting more. And your soul needs you now. And the two of you, you and your soul, need to heal each other. Of course, this is part of my theory of the inner human life. So this idea that Isaac was traumatized by loss, not by the Akedah. So of course, Rebekah sweeps in and she says, well, why don't you reach out to Hagar and Ishmael? They don't live that far. She says, well, my tribe would never permit it. She says, you're the head of the tribe. You're the head of the tribe. What are you worried about? So she engineers Isaac, Ishmael, and Hagar getting back together. And of course, we know from the backstory that Keturah, according to the rabbis, is Hagar. And then Hagar arriving at the family meeting one day, she says, I have some news for everybody. And they say what? She says, Abraham and I are back together. And Ishmael and Isaac go, what? That crazy man who tried to kill us? They say, yeah, love's an ornery beast. Anyway, so he's worked a lot of stuff through. He's not talking to that God anymore. You guys are safe. So how about if we bring Abraham into the family, just a little bit. So that's why when Abraham dies, who's attending his funeral? Ishmael and Yitzchak. Of course, Keturah is there. She's Abraham's wife at the time, meaning Hagar. And of course, Isaac brings along Rivkah. Okay, so this is just a little examples of my studying the story and bringing in my own spiritual moral psychological interest. So now to today, I want to bring people on. Everybody's here for the first time tonight. So now, the story of Rivka and Yaakov tricking Isaac, I don't need to talk about it. It's been so talked about. I've talked it to death, so we're going to just skip over that. The question is Esav. And this is actually what propelled my interest in Rivka. How did she heal Esav? All right, so everybody's gone. She sits down with Esav and says, we need to talk. Partly because she loved Jacob. He's gone. Isaac loved Esav, but gave the blessing to Jacob. Knowingly or not, there's this estrangement between Rivka and Esav. Rivka as the parent, the deep, wise parent. She's not just a trained psychologist. She's a trained psychologist with a spiritual gift. She sits with her son and she says, explain to me your anger. He says, isn't it obvious? She says, it's not obvious till you tell me. Explain to me your anger. So he starts to go through and says, okay, entitlement. I'm entitled to that birthright, not Jacob. So here's where my midrash kicks in. I explained a little bit in the Shabbat thought. She says, let's talk about that. So you know that your grandfather Abraham had two other brothers. Their father was Terach. If you go back to Genesis 11, God told Terach to go to Canaan. The first person sent to Canaan was not Abraham, Avram, was Terach. And Terach stopped in Haran, and we don't know why. I gave a whole Radi Dvar Torah on the person on a mission who goes into a rest stop out of avoiding where they need to go, and they build their little camp on the rest stop. Why? Because they're avoiding their mission in life. I've seen it myself with other people. It's my interpretation of Terach. So he's living in Haran has Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. So Rivka says to Esau, who's the firstborn? Abraham. Why didn't he get the birthright? Why did he leave town? Esau says, never thought about it. She says, would you like to know who got the birthright of the three sons? The youngest. The youngest. Haran got the birthright, my grandfather. But he died. And Esau says, how? And she says, I'll get to that, which means I'll tell you later how Haran died. But Abraham left town, quite hurriedly. Esau says, but doesn't it say that Lech Lecha, that God said get out of town? Rivka says, that's the cover-up. So this idea that the Bible is a cover-up, what a fun idea. Right? This is the conceit of Midrash. There is a real narrative, as it were. They take a biblical word and they give you the depth, the background. So the Bible doesn't say what it means. So according to Midrash, sometimes the Bible says the opposite of what it means. So I've added the idea that I got from this book, Lichiot im HaTanach, to live intensely with the Bible. The Bible is a cover-up. There's a drama going on behind the scenes, and the text is produced by people covering for God. Right? I find it a wonderfully, wickedly humorous idea. So I brought it here. She says, but what about this Lech Lecha thing where God said, Lech Lecha and go to Canaan? She says, yeah, it's true, but there's something else under the ground. That's not the only reason Avram fled Haran. She says, I'll tell you later. But what happened with the birthright? Now, this is something you need to look. Just look up the word Milcah, Milcah or Kah, Milcah, who's the daughter of Haran, the deceased brother of Abraham. Milcah means queen, Malka. So, and if you look at her, she is she's overemphasized in the story. You know what? I actually think I have the text ready to go, so I can show you this. Hold on. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to go back to You Fine People. I'm going to hit the share button, and I'm going to go to Safaria. Okay. This goes back to Genesis 11. Haran died in the living presence of his father, meaning he died young, and therefore left were Avram, the oldest brother, Nahor, the second brother. Okay, and then it says, the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran. Right? Now, as far as we can tell, Nahor was a kind of a nobody. He was the middle brother, not exceptional. I'm sure he worked for a living and showed up for work and was a fun, playful dad, but nothing special. Milcah was especially picked out here. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, who is the father of Milcah. Now look at this. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, who is the father of Milcah. Why do we have to emphasize that again? The main thing that jumps out at the text is something special about Milcah, or I say Milcah, Yiddish-inspired Hebrew. So now we go to the end of the Akedah story, chapter 22. I'm on Safari.com, by the way, if you don't know this website. It's also an app for phones, but I love using this. It's one of the best Bible websites. Okay, Genesis 22. This is after the Akedah. After the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. And what do we have here? At the end of Genesis 22, 22:20, 19:20. Vayhi acharei hadvarim ha'ela, after these things, vayugad la'Avraham. It was told to Avraham, lemor, hine yalda Milcah gam hi. Goes back to Milcah or Milcah. She also bore a son. Banim lenachor, achika, your brother. So it's not that your brother bore children, but Milcah bore children. Yalda Milcah gam hi banim lenachor achika. To Nachor, your brother, in case you forgot about your middle brother, because no one actually can remember his name. They go, what was that guy's name? Nachor, that's right. All right, so now here are the names of the Milcah's children. At Uz, by the way, Uz was the land that Job came from, his firstborn, then several other names. And then she finally gets down to Ve'et Yidlov, Ve'et Bituel. So this is her last son, Bituel. Ubituel Yalad et Rivka. Okay, so now we know that Milcah had Bituel. Bituel Yalad Rivka. So as Rebekah is explaining this, in my conceit, she has them actually pull out the Torah. Now, I have this adage, if you're in the Torah, you don't have the Torah. I'm making an exception for this case. Because as Rivka is explaining things to Esau, she says, pull out your Chumash and let's take a look. So look at 22:23. Bituel Yalad et Rivka. And she has Ela Yalda Milcah Lenachor. It doesn't say these are the children of Nachor, the father as a progenitor, rather Milcah. So she has Esau read this. He says, what's missing? He says, your brother Lavan. She says, yeah, he's not there at all. So he thinks, and she says, he being, there's only the firstborn son, why doesn't he have the Bechorah? And now Esau is beginning, his entitlement theory is beginning to totter. Again, according to my Midrash, Abraham doesn't receive the Bechorah from Terach. He leaves town. Is supposed to go to Haran, the youngest. He dies under mysterious circumstances. It goes to his daughter Milcah. She bears Bituel. We'll assume that the Bechorah went to him. And when he has children, it doesn't even mention that Lavan is a child of his. Okay, now we're going to jump to Genesis 24, where we have the story of Rebekah and Eliezer, 24:15. Okay. Now look how Rebekah is defined. 24:15. Sorry, 24:15. Okay. So this is when Eliezer meets Rivka. Rivka came out. Yotzet, vehine Rivka yotzet, asher yulda leVituel ben Milcah, eshet Nachor. So not born to Bituel, but rather born to Milcah, the wife of Nahor, the brother of Avraham. Then it goes further down in 24:24. How should she introduce herself? Vatomer elav bat Betuel anochi. I'm the daughter of Betuel. Ben Milka asher yalda le Nachor. Again, Milka before Nachor. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why. But I'm not the only one, by the way. Other people have noticed. Milka is emphasized, is hovering behind the text somewhere. So I just came up with the idea she received the birthright. Okay? And so then, of course, when Betuel has two children, Rivka and Lavan, Lavan's not mentioned, that she receives the birthright. She's explaining all this to Esau. And then the light begins to go on. He says, so, but why'd you leave? If you had the birthright, why did you leave? And the light goes on. Jacob just got the birthright. Why is Jacob leaving? Because Esau wanted to kill him. He said, did your brother want to kill you like 20 years when you left? And I see this as a question hovering over the abyss. Does the birthright create murderous rage? When Haran died, Haran, was in my mind the favorite son. He died. We don't know why. I'm going to think about him. I have my investigators working on the death of Haran. It's not looking good for the Bible. So he looks at his mother and said, "Wait, you have the birthright, not your brother, and you left Padan Aram because of your brother's envious rage. So I'm being like your brother." And she lets him put it together. Yeah, pretty much. And then Esau thinks to himself, this whole birthright thing, it's not about, it's like the custom is the oldest. That's never happened once in our family, ever. And my entitlement rage is part of the family inheritance of hatred of siblings. And here I am doing it again. So you could call this inherited trauma, or the inherited structure of sibling rivalry or hatred, or even hatred between nations. Look at what's happening in the Middle East. Both, I'll say some Palestinians and Israel claim the same land. I think Israelis, as you know, have been prepared for coexistence for a long time, not since the Intifada of the early 2000s when they blew up 100 kids on the beach in Tel Aviv. That kind of soured them to the idea of reconciliation with the Palestinians. And as long as you don't recognize us as a Jewish state and want to kill us, we're not going to give you your own state because we think we know what you'll do with it. Well, Hamas says, we don't want reconciliation. We want to destroy Israel. So here we have this birthright called the land of Israel, or called Palestine. It's a name of a geographic region. You can call it whatever you want, but they say it's our birthright. For us to have our birthright, we must take it from you. And remember, there are some people, this is the definition of envy. Jealousy is, I wish I had what you had. That's how it was defined to me. Jealousy is, I wish I had what you have. Envy is, I need to kill you because you have it. I need to kill you because you had it. Now, sometimes this killing is through gossip, is through, public assassination. But sometimes envy can actually create murder. If you've seen many, many shows, I watch a lot of police procedurals. Why do people kill others? They want the money. They want the inheritance. This other person in their life is getting in their way. They need something more than that person to live, and they conspire and execute a murder. So this idea, this person that I'm close to, they're in my way. I want their money. I want the inheritance. I want the life insurance. Licenses murder, murdering the mother of a guy's children, the father of a guy's children. So this, in my mind, I'll expand on this. Esau suddenly gets the picture. He says, all I thought about is I could have been a contender. Someone took something from me. That was my life. I was entitled. And she says, by custom, it's never happened in our family. In fact, our tradition is someone either gets killed or nearly killed about this, and you're part of the family tragedy. Okay? Now I want to take a deep breath and think about all of us. Sometimes we're about the family tragedy, life's tragedy, the human condition tragedy. You think you're acting with your own free will, doing what you need to do, and you don't know there's something going on. Part of what's going on is, the human condition, like these people that said, I'm suicidal because I've lost everything. No one loves me. I said, well, there's God and your soul who needs you. Changes things up. Sometimes a person says, I hate the world because I lost my money. I think about the Holocaust, all these places where everything was taken from somebody, including their children. They come to America penniless and they build a new life. I said, I've met Holocaust survivors who came here. They lost, this one woman in particular, lost her husband, lost her children, came to America, learned the language, built a life. I said, what she didn't do was fold up her tent and live life depressed, like Miss Havisham in Great Expectations. I said, so you think your loss is causing you your depression. It certainly is activating it, but at a very deep level, I believe this deeply, our emotions, our feelings are under the sway of the mind. The mind, with its free will, can look at depression and say, Genug, we've had enough. We're going a different direction. So life does not determine our inner life. Our inner life is created from habits and, most importantly, the decision of what you want to do about yourself. So your habits will say, this loss I cannot recover from this loss. That's what, as it were, the conditioned mind says. That's how you've lived your whole life. And then one day, the angel shows up into the free will part of your brain and says, not necessarily. We don't have to bequeath the family tragedy. We don't have to do it like it's always done before. And I think that's one of the deepest parts of my work, Wisdom Works, which we're finally launching in January, and we'll tell you much more about it. I have an entire lifetime curriculum figured out. But part of Wisdom Works is where people go to therapy and they find out, my past is why I am. And I was very influenced by the work of James Hillman and Michael Ventura, who said, your life is not about your past. Your life is about your future. Your life is not determined by your past. Your life is determined by your future. And your future, as much as we are constrained, is a function of your decision for what you want to be tomorrow. So sometimes when I come into a counseling situation, a person says, I know my wife is like this because she never worked through her father issues. I said, let's leave her father issues alone. I'll find out why your wife is like she is. Well, what about you? Oh, yeah, I have my abandoned issues in my family, this and my family, that. Oh, so you're a product of your past. Yes. I said, can you be different tomorrow if you decided? I don't know. Aren't we like a function of our past? Don't our personalities come from our childhood? I said, I don't believe so. They said, well, you don't believe it? I said, no, I don't believe it because I've made decisions not to have my past determine who I am. And I know other people, they simply said, I'm deciding. Then you have to come up with the will, the vision, and the skill because you've decided. Now I go back to Rivka, and of course I see Rivka as a image of myself. She says to Esau, you don't have to be this way. First of all, you're wrong. No one's entitled to the birthright. We've seen that constantly. Number two, your sense that your brother stole something from you, right? There are things that you can't even understand about why people do things, including the oracle that I got that felt like from God. And my job here was that the older will serve the younger. That's you, temporarily. She says, what you don't know, Esau, is you will also be the progenitor of a great nation on your own. Not here. That's for Jacob to take on. And then she says to him, and I got to tell you, it's not going to be all that fun for Jacob. The fact that he has the birthright does not mean life will be pleasant. In fact, as you will see, this is one of Jacob's discoveries. He says, wait, I get the birthright and I got to live for 20 years under my mother's, creepy crook of a brother Laban. This is the reward for the birthright. And I come back and my wife Rachel dies on me. And then my sons try to kill one of my other sons. He says, what's this birthright about? So what you discover is the birthright, the birthright's going to sometimes be more of a curse than a blessing. sometimes the birthright is a curse and not a blessing. So now everything gets turned over, and as Rebekah is explaining this to Esau, he says, wow, there's so much tragedy. There's so much pain in the world, and you caught me adding to it. And here's where Rivka becomes his Rav, his rabbi, his counselor, and says, let me help you with this. What you can do to reduce the pain in the world. I have a plan for you. Eventually, Jacob's coming back. Okay? We need to work on a plan for you to do one of the greatest goods you can do in the world, where you can change the trajectory of another person's life in about 5 minutes. And he says, how? She says, okay, I'll tell you. And that's for next week. All right. So I'll stop here tonight. And it's a great question. The question is, since Rivka had an oracle, did Milcah have an oracle, or has this angel that appears throughout the story, was that angel already at work in the life of the three brothers, or in the life of Terach? Okay, when Terach was moving to Canaan and he pulls off the road, the angel says, what are you doing? We're supposed to go to Canaan. God said, Lech Lecha, back to you in Ur Kasdim. Abraham was not living in Ur Kasdim when God said Lech Lecha. They were living in Haran, halfway, almost at Canaan. And Terach pulls off the road, and the angel says, what are you doing? He says, I'm stuck. My son died. I can't get over it. He said, oh, your son died. I get it. He was actually a beautiful young man. But you have a mission. And Terach says, I can't do it. And I just had the angel saying, I got to start all over again. And then he's like, okay, it's going to be complicated, but fine, you stay here. You got 3 sons. Sorry, your eldest is not going to get the birthright. I'm going to have to go down to your youngest. And then, of course, he has Milcah, and then Milcah has to have some things worked out, and the oracle angel appears again. So because I'm so fixed on Rivka, what I need to go back now is go back to the earlier narratives and, again, see the Bible as a cover-up of the actual deeper events, which is the nature of Midrash. The Midrash says, you think that's what happened, but there's the rest of the story. So now that I've taken this hermeneutic, this interpretive idea is really embedded within me, I think I'm going to rediscover much of the Bible. And Mirav says, what are you so happy about? What are you laughing about? And I said, oh my God, I got this Midrash brewing inside of me. I'm cracking up. I'm laughing. And then she says, well, what about this? And what about this? What about this? I said, I haven't thought about it. Give me a minute. Miriam got really intrigued when I shared this with her. And she says, oh my God, you got a good idea. And you're loving it. And, so last night she was watching me just radiant about getting ready to come on, come online this morning. So this is just another example. As a rabbi who's, I think my core material is good. The wisdom works and all this, and archetypal psychology. It's been great. And then something said to me, "There's something new in you." And my muse was saying, "It's great, and hopefully you'll publish everything. It's going to be really wonderful. But I have something new for you." And I just got out of her way. And so exactly. And what happens is, because we have a fixed text and an honorable tradition called Midrash, which says you can use your imagination here. You don't have to say, does it come from here, which is more explication of the text. Midrash is, how does it excite my imagination? Think of the permission we have of the tradition that says, you can ask what the text means. That's a really good explication of words and sentences and so forth. And there is, what does it do to your imagination? And the greatest of this is the Midrash of the ancient rabbis and the Zohar. So if you ever read something, here's one thing when I have students, they say to me, well, this text makes me think. I said, hold on, let's see what the text says. Let's explicate the text and then give me your Midrash, just so they don't confuse their Midrash with what the text actually means. So I think we should separate that. First, the so-called pshat. What do the words mean? What's the grammar? How are the words used elsewhere in the Bible? Like, what does the text actually mean? As much as we can recover, you might say to the degree there is a direct meaning, what the text directly means. And then the Midrash says, and here's how the text excites my imagination. And if it excites my imagination, and imagination sometimes is connected to the soul, and if it gives soul meaning to my life, maybe my excited soul inspired imagination would be inspiring to someone else. And that's why people love midrash. So so many things I want to do now that our time's our own. I can put everything up in recording. We're going to get our studio back up again within about a month. Is just produce content, and teach you Genesis Rabbah and the other Rabbahs, and just bring you into this wonderful woolly world of rabbinic interpretation. And you don't have to schedule a class. I could just put it up. I didn't make Milcah prominent in the text. The authors of the Bible did. I didn't make Rivka the hero of the story. The Bible did that. I didn't make Tamar the Hebrew of the Judah story. The Bible did that. I didn't make Bathsheba the hero of David's life, right? I didn't make the $5 of Zelophehad. When they say who wrote the Torah, the biblical text, puts down women. It's the opposite. The biblical text is a field where women constantly sprout. Now, this is directly in the biblical text. The biblical text is not anti-women, it's pro-women. It wants to take a culture where women were silenced and constantly, over and over again, give women agency, give women voices. I remember when Viva Zornberg, we had the great honor that she visited our synagogue. And somebody said something about, the place of women in the Bible. And she looked and she said, what are you talking about? The Bible portrays women as the turning points in so many stories. So, we have to get this idea of the patriarchy. Viva Zornberg said, that's never been a useful idea for me. What's been a useful idea for me is to hear how a text composed during the time of patriarchy gave unusually strong voices and to various women characters, including Devorah, the great judge, and gave them voices and also the power to change the course of biblical history. So I didn't create this. The Bible created it. So I'm saying to the Bible, is that really what you're up to? The Bible says, yeah, that's what we're up to. I say, can I take that a little bit further? Vavakasha. Do anything you want with it. But remember, the Bible created Milcah. The Bible created Rivka. This is the Euthyphro, by the way, for those who studied Euthyphro with me. Remember the Socrates and Euthyphro? Euthyphro thinks that he has to do, I think, a rather dastardly deed because of justice and the piety what the gods want. And Socrates says, how do you know what God wants? He says, well, that's what the ancestors did. Socrates says, that's not my question. Because the gods disagree with themselves. Things change. How do you know that what you have in mind is just? Please define justice and piety. That's the discussion. And Euthyphro cannot explain what is propelling him. I'm propelled by justice and piety. What do you mean? I have no idea what I mean. So what is it? It's what the ancestors do. Socrates says, obviously not. The end of Euthyphro is, wait a minute. So custom of the past doesn't define the truth of the moment and the future? Now, Socrates doesn't say it, but he means it. So a big part was one of the reasons I want to get back to, I was going to say studying philosophy. I want to teach what philosophy means to me. Like, there's not much in Aristotle that inspires me. There's a few, the poetics and the rhetoric and so forth. Most of the Platonic dialogues, and I thought maybe, and one of the things I'm going to add, I call this Wisdom Works Level 4. Level 1 is interpersonal relationships. Level 2 is the inner life. Level 3 is spiritual psychology. Level 4 is all the other stuff that helps accrue to my wisdom, including the ideas that I'm talking about here, and especially Socrates. So I see Socrates as having an attitude toward Greek tradition like the Midrash, meaning ain't necessarily so. There's other ways to think about this. Okay, the question is, I mentioned Life is About Your Future, Not Your Past. There's a wonderful book published in the mid-'80s by James Hillman, the great
James Hillman. Okay.
James Hillman, archetypal psychologist, and Michael Ventura, who is a writer for the LA Weekly. I don't know if any of you remember, LA Weekly in its heyday was a source of inspiration and humor and critique and like an expose. I loved the LA Weekly. They had a great lead writer, Jill Stewart, that I reached out to, and we actually brought her to Oratora once to give a talk because she says, "Yeah, that's the story, but that's a cover-up." And she went into LA life, exposing in the most delightful way imaginable. Well, another person on the LA Weekly staff was Michael Ventura, who again was a renegade, was a rogue. So James Hillman, if I recall correctly, I might have dreamt this. They wrote a book called this: "We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and nobody's getting better." That's the name of their book. Did I get it right? We have 100 years of psychotherapy and nobody's getting better. That's the title of the book. So they go in and they say, because people think they're a function of the past and not their future. It's their past, not their destiny. Well, how do you know what your destiny is? That's a better question than my past. What's your destiny? And then what you want to do is achieve your destiny. So James Hillman, archetypal psychologist, Michael Ventura, a renegade journalist, they get together and they wrote a super fun, insightful, tiny little book. If you can find it on a used bookshelf. Now, again, I may be misremembering it. Maybe it's not as good as I remember. But I remember reading this in 1985. I was a huge fan of James Hillman, a huge fan of Michael Ventura, a huge fan of the LA Free Press, and another one of those experiences. Hillman, Ventura, Free Press, Jill Stewart, that caused a swerve in my life. So that's another source of my becoming. Yes, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy, if I'm not mistaken. James Hillman and Michael Ventura, which for me gave a concise understanding of where some psychotherapy can go wrong and a different kind of counseling can go better, which is you're not a function of your past. You're a function of your decision today for what you will yourself to be tomorrow. That's one of my little epigrams for Wisdom Works.